Okay, so if you see on your test anything, just to review, about direct dumping, that's point. Non-point, you'll see words like runoff or any activity that happened on land. Like if it says a nearby city um, is known for dropping toxins into the environment, they end up in the body of water, that is non-point. If you see the word runoff, that is non-point. Those are some pictures of pollution, and I'm going to talk about eutrophication for a minute. Eutrophication, as if you remember, we learned about this in the beginning when we talked about nitrates and phosphates. And I'm going to explain this process in a step by step, but I'm going to jump out real quick, and I just want to show you that. Like, I'm going to point to what I'm going to talk about. These are fertilizers which are filled with nitrates and phosphates used for farming, and they can either leach, which is a form of infiltration, but water infiltrates, chemicals leach, and anything that enters the soil with water can end up in an aquifer and then in a large body of water. Or those chemicals can run off. Now this happens with heavy synthetic chemical fertilizers, because even though they're made of nitrates and phosphates, which are somewhat, organic or needed for plant growth, I should say, because they're chemical fertilizers, the plants can't take in the excess fertilizer, and that's why they end up running off or leaching. When that happens, all of this is going to happen, and that's what I'm going to explain next. So, you put the fertilizers, everything I just talked about, into the soil, and they're going to end up in a lake or an ocean. Now, these excess nitrates are going to cause an algae bloom, and what that means is algae becomes overpopulated, which means it has its own limited resources. And just to remind you, that's amensalism. This whole process is amensalism, because algae is not getting anything from being there, but it's harming the ocean, or the organisms in the ocean, I should say. Well, when this algae dies, and I'm going to say one thing. One thing can happen. The sunlight can block, right here, let me jump out so I can point to it. The sunlight can block any plants that are underneath and reduce photosynthesis of those organic plants. But the other thing that happens is when the algae dies, algae is considered oxygen demanding waste. So I'm going to go here. And oxygen demanding waste, you're going to have to know this. They can reference it as ODW, requires bacteria to break it down, right? Like any waste. But that bacteria requires lots of oxygen in order to decompose the organic matter. So they're called oxygen demanding bacteria. So what's going to happen is they're going to reduce the levels of dissolved oxygen in the water, and fish are going to die anyway. So you have two contributors to why oxygen levels decline. And they call them dissolved oxygen because it's oxygen in the ocean. One is the blocking of sunlight, and that reduces photosynthesis. And the other is because the overpopulation of algae has limited resources, it dies, and it requires bacteria to break it down, and that bacteria is going to use large amounts of oxygen in order to do that. Now, I'm going to leave, I'm going to talk a little bit about fish farms. I'm not sure if it'll be on the test, and I'll let you know. But fish farms, no matter what you think, because we're growing fish, any type of breeding, any type of selective farming is limiting diversity, because you're choosing what to breed, so you're not allowing diversity to thrive. You're choosing your genes or your species or something along that nature. The biggest downfalls, and I want you to know that fish farms are a solution to overfishing. So it became a thing because we were running out of fish, and it's the only way we can have specific organisms of fish even to be able to sell them, because if you catch one fish, it's so expensive to sell it. So this is a solution to overfishing, lack of fish, and being able to eat fish in general. But this farm, which can be in the middle of an ocean, it could be in the backyard, so it could be oceanic fish farms or freshwater fish farms. they're so concentrated. So think of densely populated. So diseases spread within the fish easy, and if a fish escapes, that disease is going to impact the surrounding ecosystem. But also, the densely populated farm produces excess waste just in that area. So you're gonna have a lot of like toxins, organic waste. Obviously, fish eliminating their own waste is waste for the ocean because it's so concentrated in one area. This is coastal development, which we're gonna talk about more when we talk about lands because it's more about land impacting water, I would say. But let me see what else. I don't think I'm gonna talk about any of these other major problems until we get into those types of energy. So that's it for marine biomes on this test.